It's not good. It's not good. Hey, not good. What's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite albums, and today I am going to do more mini albums reviews. Let's go. And actually, in fact, I'll be doing the 2012 edition of mini albums review because I'll be preparing for the year end, the decade end list. So I'll have to listen to 50 times more albums than I usually listen to in a year. Before I start off talking about some amazing albums and some shitty albums in 2012, I do want to mention 3 good albums that I didn't have enough time to talk about. One of them is Ondatrópica, which is easily a 9 out of 10 in my opinion. It's this super large double album where 40 something or so Latin Spanish music artists just come together and just jam. And there are a lot of amazing tracks there with a lot of energy, and it's just very fun and pleasant, and hopefully someday I can talk about it in a full-length video. Another album I would like to talk about is Bad Bad Not Good, the instrumental jazz band, sort of the second album, that is. And they do cover a lot of different songs, instrumentals on that album, and those covers are pretty amazing. And also, I recently started to listen to Soap&Skin's Narrow, which has some pretty emotional and beautiful ballads. Okay, anyway, we'll start off with DopeBody, Natural History. This is a hardcore punk, post-hardcore sludge rock band from Baltimore, apparently, or just Maryland in general, not exactly from Baltimore itself. I don't know. But anyway, this is a pretty special album because I like punk rock and I like hardcore punk, but this album for me is kind of hard to click at first listen because it's unlike any other punk album I've heard. It's actually pretty freaky and weird, but also kind of upbeat and actually very fun. It's like party rock, but way more aggressive. The first track is easily the least good, the worst track. It's called Shook, and it has this very slow and lumbering beginning. I do like the chimes and the primal drums, but the track still feels kind of aimless and directionless. But pretty much every single track after this point is actually really fun, expressive, aggressive, and noisy. We have Road Dog, which has this really fun bass riff, some slidey guitars, as well as some chucketing guitars that goes and the hook on this thing is actually really memorable because it's always sung very expressively and wildly. Do what you wanna do, go where you wanna go, be what you wanna be, do what you gonna do. Up next we have the track Beat, which is way more slow, heavy, and sludgy. However, the vocals, they're very shouty, and the vocals itself, it just complements with these sludgy riffs really well. Also, we get these detuned guitars, and even though the track isn't really all that melodic, that's why I find it kind of hard to get in. It's still really well performed. We also have the track Twice the Life, which is very different from the track Beat. It has these bouncy, bright guitar riffs and these shimmery guitars, these tropical punk rhythms, and these keyboards which are just dragging on, and the whole thing feels very, very fun and celebratory and colorful, actually. We also have the track Powder, which is one of my favorite here, simply because of the quacky, bouncy guitar riffs. Bang, 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 bang. It's just extremely fun to listen to the track. Also, I really like the loud, noisy, glistening chorus, and the scratchy guitar solo is amazing. The track Out of Mind also has some aggressive, sludgy guitar riffs, but it's wrapped around by these noodly, silly guitars, and the whole thing is also really fun with a very hard ending. Next page, we also have the track Highway, which has some distorted guitar riffs, some really straightforward punk drums, and also a wall of noisy guitars at the end that just clashes upon all the instrumentals. It's actually pretty stunning. We also have the track Weird Mirror, also one of my favorites on the album. We get these fun wailing guitars and these chord progressions, which are just soaring in the sky. You know, it's just unapologetic. And we also get these shouts and chants, which are actually kind of catchy. And the album ends off with Lazy Slave. Pretty funny and creative episode titles on this album, I must say. But yeah, on the album ender, we get some noisy, lumbering drums and guitars, and a very fun but also loud wall of noise. Some really tight performance wraps up the album with these loud shrieks, and overall I think the album is incredibly fun, even though it's a hard time to get in, but once it clicks, it really clicks, and I'm honestly feeling a strong 8 on this album. My least favorite is Shook. The second album to talk about is PerfumeGenius with Put Your Back Into It. PerfumeGenius is Mike Hadrius, and he is an indie pop, chamber pop, almost lo-fi folk pop singer, and he does make some really beautiful and soul-touching music on this album. While his music isn't necessarily complex or dense or loud and ambitious, it's very simplistic, but it's also very beautiful and emotionally potent. It's actually very touching. We have the album opener AWOL Marine with some beautiful pianos and this wall of sound at the end, which is just almost a grand way to open the album. The track Normal Song is in 3/4 time signature with its very smooth and watery acoustic guitars. But I think the vocals is what makes this track so beautiful. It's so humane and so intimate, and I also really like the reverby pianos as well. The track No Tear is the shortest song on the album if you don't count the opener, and we get these gospel chord progression as well as some deep pitched vocals backing up the main vocals, and the whole thing is also really beautiful. I also really love the distant drums. It makes the track feel incredibly spacey, but also very like something powerful is going on, but you can't quite touch it. I mean, I think most of the tracks on the album sound really similar, but because of how short and concise this album is, it doesn't feel boring, it doesn't feel like it drags on, and because of how beautiful and emotionally potent a lot of the ballads on the album are, I think it still manages to be one of the more engaging albums that are that simple. We have the track 17 with its ominous strings, which sets a really soft and eerie tone, but the track still feels I really can't find an adjective other than gorgeous or beautiful. The track Take Me Home has a 6/8 time signature, but it's one of the rarer moments on the album where the instrumentals, they actually feel uplifting and faithful, even though the guitars do feel kind of lonely at some points. The track Dirge is probably my least favorite on the album because it's a little bit repetitive, and it's definitely the blandest track off of the entire record. But the next track, Dark Parts, is easily one of my favorites. The vocal melodies is extremely gorgeous, and this track almost sounds like a very beautiful part of a wedding ceremony where everything just happens in slow motion, and you look at your romantic partner thinking that this is the moment that you've been waiting for since the day you were born. This track also sounds like you looking back to your childhood when life was way simpler, and it's just very beautiful overall. I also really like the noisy guitars at the end. The track All Waters has this bed of airy synths and some really genuine and sincere vocals, and the track Hood sounds like a very heartbreaking confessional track, which actually builds up to this loud wall of instrumentals with these deep pianos and loud drums. One of the rarer moments on the album where it can't hold itself anymore. It can't, all the painful emotions, they can't hold itself anymore. It just bursts, it explodes. But the album puts itself back at its place on the title track, which sounds incredibly empathetic and warm. The track Floating Spit also has a bed of synths, which are beautiful, some distant vocals and muffled beats, which I'm not a fan of actually, because they are a little bit too far away. And the album ends off with Sister Song, which sounds like an old folk song, but PerfumeGenius sized, with the really nice, beautiful duet. And I think overall this album is fantastic. The more I listen to it, the more I feel touched by it, and it's one of the few albums where less is more. And the performances, they are very gentle, and it just feels like they're decorating themselves so neatly and nicely in order to prevent these negative emotions from exploding at your face. And after listening to the album, I'm sure a lot of people would be speechless or choked up because of how simplistically powerful this album is. Yeah, I'm honestly feeling a strong 8 to a light 9 on the album. Light 9, yeah. My favorite track here is probably either Hood or Dark Parts, actually Dark Parts, and my least favorite is Dirge. The next album I'm going to talk about is AbSoul's Control System. AbSoul is a rapper from California off of the Top Dog Entertainment label, alongside with Kendrick Lamar and J-Rock and Schoolboy Q and all that good stuff. I think BJ the Chicago Kid is also on that label. And this album is actually pretty great, pretty consistent, pretty solid, where AbSoul delivers a set of moody, spacey, West Coast infused, conscious hip-hop tracks. We have tracks like track 2 and Terrorist Threats, where the beats are kind of twittery and light, but the instrumentals are very melodramatic and epic in a great way. And just these instrumentals alone aren't great, but AbSoul's performance, AbSoul's very aggressive and also free and liberated performance on top of these instrumentals is what makes this album really great for me. I really like the line on track 2 where AbSoul describes himself as an abstract asshole, and also on Terrorist Threats, which actually sounds kind of bleak and dark, just a little bit. We get Danny Brown's feature, which is actually fantastic here. I think the album opener, Solo Ho 3, is also pretty good. While it's not one of the better tracks here, I really like how spacey and epic it sounds. The track Bohemian Grove actually has this really nice, lighthearted, relaxing, jazzy instrumental, and some nice R&B performance at the end. The track Double Standards is also one of the highlights on the album, in my opinion. We get these very beautiful pianos and some constant drums and a really catchy hook, actually. Standards. And this track, it's called Double Standards, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's about gender equality as well. And we also get the track Pineal Gland. We get these worrisome pianos, which are just okay, but the freaky performances on top is what makes this track good. We also have the tracks like Sopa and Nothing Something, as well as the track Beautiful Death, which I think the beats are kind of dry, kind of okay. The performances are also just okay, and they do not really contribute much to the album. But we also have tracks like Lust Demon featuring J-Rock and BJ the Chicago Kid, which is this really fun, energetic West Coast banger. The rapping performances here, they are fantastic, and it's a really catchy song overall. We also have the track Illuminate featuring Kendrick Lamar, and I think Kendrick Lamar is great, even though the instrumentals are kinda airy. The track Rebellion is a pretty odd track with these marchy drums underneath. The instrumentals are also really spacey and airy, but the hook, I think, is fantastic. And also, we have the track Showin' Love, which is also just okay. One of the more so-so tracks on the album. We also have the track Empathy, which is a very, very Californian jazz rap track. It sounds like one of the tracks off of Section 80, to be honest. But it's still not bad, in my opinion. The track Book of Soul, is one of the more emotional cuts on the album, where AbSoul talks about a longtime partner and how she passed away. And it's actually really emotional and soulful, like the title. And the album ends off with Black Lip Bastard, featuring the entire gang Black Hippie. That's why this album ending sounds really gangsta, really fun, and grimy, actually. And overall, I really enjoyed this album. I think this album is an 8 out of 10 as well. My favorite track here is Terrorist Threats, and my least favorite is Sopa. Sopa is my least favorite. I think Double Standards is a really great song, though. The fourth album I'm going to talk about is Spiritualized with Sweetheart Sweet Light. So Spiritualized is a space rock, psych rock band. They have released some pretty great albums in the 90s. However, in the 2000s, they kind of drifted off to a more garage rock direction, which didn't really do well for them. However, on this album, they had a return of sound and style, almost. The music here on this album are also space rock and psych rock, but also very orchestral as well. We have the album opener, which is an intro, but the real album opener is Hey Jane, a song that's almost 9 minutes long, and I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the better songs in the decade. We get these blissful guitars and these really fun drums in the beginning, which is really fun and jolly and blissful. The song is about loving a girl who's actually a bad girl, a girl who is who may pose some negative impacts on you. However, as the song progresses, it slowly morphs and changes into this very noisy and deranged jam, and then it hits a climax, and then it breaks down, it dissolves into this quiet little track, and then it slowly builds up again, just slowly but surely, until it hits another really amazing, blissful, joyful climax at the end. And we also get these strings and weird sound effects towards the end, which I think is amazing. And overall, the song is a roller coaster ride. It's stunning. We also get the track Little Girl, which has these emotional strings, which are actually fantastic. And overall, the track is a sweet pop song with some really nice, endearing vocals. The track Get What You Deserve is definitely the worst track on the album, unfortunately, because it is essentially a very bland, noisy jam. Even though it sounds kind of bright, it doesn't really progress at all. There is little to no dynamics on the track. But then we have the track Too Late, which is one of the sadder cuts on the album. The strings in the start is very sweet and lush. And then we get these tongue-in-cheek vocals, which are sweet, but the lyrics are really bitter and sad. We have the track Headin' for the Top Now, which is also one of the longer tracks on the album. We get some garage riffs throughout the track, which are repetitious, and some noisy wobbly guitars, which I think is a fantastic touch alongside with the guitar riffs. Slowly but surely, we get these woodwinds sort of creeping underneath, and then they start to grow and they start to fight against one another, clashing against one another. We have these weary vocals and some kids singing at the end, and it's another one of those pretty amazing giant tracks on the album. We also have the track Freedom, which is this very intimate, low-key acoustic ballad, which sounds like a second helping of the track Too Late, so I'm not all that crazy about the track. And then we have the track I Am What I Am, which is this psychedelic rock jam. And at first, I'm not too crazy about it because, again, it doesn't feel like it's going and progressing anywhere. However, I do like how smoky this track sounds. And also, we get some nice background vocals on the track. The track Mary actually sounds very depressing and dreary with a very emotional climax, which I also really love. And the track Life's a Problem and the last track, So Long, You Pretty Thing, are also two very religious tracks where on the former track he talks about how he wants Jesus to take away all his sins, and on the latter he being the vocalist of the band, he talks about how he wants Jesus to help him because he's a weak person. And religion aside, I really appreciate his modesty and honesty and sincerity on these two tracks. On the former, we get a soft bed of strings, and it sounds like a really beautiful gospel lullaby. And on the second track, it's even more beautiful with some really nice instrumentals, which becomes blissful at the end. And overall, I think this album is really solid and a really nice return for Spiritualized. I am also feeling an 8 out of 10 for the album. My favorite track here is Hey Jane. Least favorite, Get What You Deserve. Okay, now here comes the entertaining part of the video. I talk about bad albums. And I'm only going to talk about two, even though I've also listened to another album in the release from the year 2012. That is The Enemy, Streets, and the Sky, which isn't like the worst album I've ever heard, but it is indeed a very bland and generic rock album. It's so generic. But yeah, first off, I would like to talk about the JohnFrusciante album. PBX Funicular Intaglio Zone. What is this album title? What is this album cover? What is this album? What is this? So JohnFrusciante is from the band Red Hot Chili Peppers, who actually made some good albums. Yeah, some good albums. Some really great songs that I actually enjoy a lot. But John's solo work, I'm not that familiar with that, but it appears that it's not so good, because this album is essentially a bunch of song ideas, a bunch of half-ass song ideas and demos, and I'm not even scratching the surface of how bad this album is. JohnFrusciante very obviously tries to be experimental on this album, and it's like he's trying too hard and not hard enough at the same time. He's not trying hard enough because he didn't really try to make music that's sort of sensible. But then at the same time, he's trying too hard because he recently discovered breakbeats, and so he basically spammed, abused breakbeats on every single track. It's fucking annoying. I'm not saying that all the tracks here are terrible. I mean, none of them are good, but some of them are more listenable than others. We have the track Ratyug, which is over 6 minutes long, and it's the only track on the album that actually sounds like it's finished or almost finished, where it sounds like a pretty stable song at the beginning with its jazzy instrumentals and this pretty constant drum beats. And even though the song ends off with these really stupid vibrating vocals, the song is still one of the better ones on the album. But yeah, other than that, this album is garbage. We have the intro track, intro/Sabam. And it starts off with these very dumb, silly bleep and bloops. And then all of a sudden we get a rush of strings, like orchestral strings. And then, of course, the breakbeats have to appear, and it just completely ruins the track. Like, this is the track, and at first it's okay. And then the breakbeat comes out of nowhere, and bam, it's gone. And the track Hearsay is ridiculous. We get these acidic bass riffs, which are just so cheap and just so sloppy. And we also get the vocals here, which are just terrible. The vocals all across the album are pretty terrible because they're barely on pitch. And some of the vocals on this album, they're so ridiculously bad. It's honestly laughable. We have the track Bike, which has these jazz drum solos just spammed all across the track. And then we get these sour synths coming out of nowhere, and these goofy vocals where JohnFrusciante goes and then of course the break beats, they came out of nowhere and ruined the song. We have the track Guitar. It's just this album is ridiculously bad. It's so laughable, actually. I mean, just look at the album cover. This album's existence is a joke. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna try to tone it down. We have the track Guitar, which sounds like a really crappy dubstep demo with these wonky guitars, which actually doesn't sound all that bad. Yeah, but it still sounds like a mess. We have the track Mistakes, which actually has a really catchy first half. And then, of course, the break beat has to come out of nowhere with these cringy screams at the end. And at the end, we get these synths, which are very spacey and futuristic. It almost sounds like it came out of a Muse song. But then again, it's a mess, so, we have the track Up Rain, which... it's bad. It's a mellow ballad. It's a mellow ballad. And then the drums appeared out of nowhere, and it's not even in sync with the tempo on the track, like the tempo of the vocals, and it just sounds off sync. And we have two tracks at the end, Sam and Some. The former sounds like a really weird sound collage track with some jazzy drums and JohnFrusciante making an effort to make this track sound like it makes sense, even though it still sounds like a total mess. And then we have the track Some, which is this little intimate futuristic pop track. And then of course the breakbeats came out of nowhere and destroyed the track. So yeah, this album is ridiculously, laughably bad. It's a 2 out of 10 from me. It's a light 2, strong 1 to a light 2. And my favorite track here is I don't even have a favorite. I mean, Rattiug is least listenable, and the track Bike is just ridiculous. And then afterwards, I would like to talk about the TingTings, Sounds from Nowheresville. And the TingTings is an indie pop duo from Manchester, England, United Kingdoms. And this album is dumb. Okay, so I'm gonna go through all the tracks. The album opener is Silence, which is an incredibly bland and one-dimensional electro-pop intro that sort of has this climax building, which builds up to this blissful electro-pop, whatever, wall of noise. And it doesn't sound terrible, but it's certainly a very bland and unoriginal opening for the album. And then after this point, this album really gets on my nerves. We have Hit Me Down Sonny, and just right off the bat, we get these vocals, and they're annoying AF. It's a duo, a man and a woman, and the woman sings and raps mostly on the album. And her voice is so annoying. It's just something about her voice, man. It's just something about her voice. It's just so annoying. It's like, just imagine if Avril Lavigne was singing a pretty nice, mellow pop song, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of the song, she stops and starts rapping in a very braggadocious way. This is essentially what this album sounds like. And of course, the rapping, the ay on the second track doesn't help at all, and even the instrumentals, they are dry and they are cheap. We have the third track, Hang It Up, with the repetitive guitar riffs, and some spoken word, half rapping. And it actually doesn't sound that bad, even though it still sucks. It sounds like kids wrote the song, is what this song sounds like. It sounds like a song for kids, with a bit of an edge, that is. And then afterwards, we have the track Give It Back, which is we get the bass riffs, which are just dry, with a very heavy garage rock tone to it, but it's still really dry. Even though the climax at the end is okay, I still think the song is nah. We have the track Guggenheim, which is just, it just gets on my nerves. It's a spoken word track, a vocal so annoying, and it's a spoken word track, and it sucks. And the guitars on this thing, which are just very minimal, they're goofy. They sound goofy, and it just feels silly. I feel like my IQ is 20% reduced after listening to this track. However, the next track, Soul Killing, is a very rare moment on the album where it actually sounds kind of good. It's a pretty summery, tropical track with some squeaky sound effects. And even though the vocals, they're very zany and very childish, but it actually perfectly matches with the bouncy, blissful guitars. You know, if the guitars are very stale, but the vocals are this childish and annoying, the track becomes annoying. But with the annoying childish vocals and the fun bouncy guitars, they actually go together to make this track sound kind of fun and summery. However, the next track totally ruins the mood. It's called One by One, and the duo tries to make this 80s electropop track as if they're Aha or something, and it sounds absolutely bland and corny and intolerable. We also have the track Day to Day, where it's your usual average 2000s high school first day of grade 10, what I ate for lunch, I'm writing it on my diary kind of high school rock song. And we also have the track Help, which is so bland, it's surprising. It's this really, really bland song where we get this very, very slow crescendo, which builds up to the end and then fizzles out as if nothing had happened. And then the album ending is also equally as bland. It's called In Your Life, and it tries super duper hard to be sad with the weepy strings and pianos. It would have sounded sadder if something climactic happened in the beginning, like a Godspeed You Black Emperor level climax, which then breaks down into some weepy strings. That would be crazy, right? Or it would have been easily sadder if we get another layer of strings or sounds underneath, just making the atmosphere more drearier. But then no, we get this very dry and bland strings session, and it just feels like this track has no depth whatsoever. So yeah, this album is bad. It's dumb, it's bad, and with all due respect, I respect them, and I know that they have potential. Like, I can tell that they have potential to make good music on the album. I mean, the track Soul Killing is a pretty good song in my opinion, but the rest of the album, oh my gosh. So yeah, 2 out of 10 as well. Favorite track is Soul Killing. Least favorite, One by One. So, what are your thoughts on these albums? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate them? Like if you like them, hate if you hate them, and subscribe if you want more. And thanks for watching. Ching!